Imagine some 500 years back, somebody invaded Mecca and destroyed that holy place and built their religious structure over it. Won't the local people try to revive or reclaim their religious structure? If they do so, will we say that's wrong?
What the Muslim conquerors would do when they conquered an area, they would go to the Hindu temple. They would convert it into a mosque. They would take the Hindu idols out of the temple, smash them to pieces, and sprinkle them on the path to walk into what is now a mosque. Suddenly, when Muslims aren't strong enough or powerful enough to do something, as what's everyone doing against our sacred symbols? Everyone must respect our stuff and our religion and our site and our mosques. And maybe if you had behaved very, very differently for the past 14 centuries, we could take that seriously.
Today, we're going to be talking about the Ram Mandir Controversy. If you don't know, just recently in India, they've inaugurated a brand new temple for Lord Ramachandra in Ayodhya in India. Ayodhya is considered to be the place where Lord Ram had his pastimes, and the site of the temple is considered to be the birthplace of Lord Ram. So it's a very holy place within Hinduism. And there's a lot of controversy around the opening of this temple, as it is built on the site where a mosque was destroyed some 30 odd years ago. Now, I will be using the word Hinduism in this video, although I do take issue with the term because I don't think it picks out a specific enough set of views in order to think of it as a religion. It's more like a family of religions. Think of it like the term Abrahamic religion. It's not at all similar to the word Islam or Christianity. But for the sake of this video, I'll use it because it's accurate enough and it's simple. Now, it does appear that the Western mainstream media is at least a little bit biased when they comment on the subject. For example, if you go and on CNN or another mainstream Western media outlet and look to read some history of the controversy, it starts with the construction of a mosque roughly 500 years ago on the site. That is a very strange place to start, if you ask me, because at least it's widely believed, and there's a lot of evidence, I would say, for this, that this mosque was built on the site of a destroyed temple, and that the site of this mosque, the site of the destroyed temple, is a particularly special holy place for Hindus. I'm not sure that a sensible case could be made that this isn't a relevant piece of the history of this conflict. I definitely don't condone any kind of tit-for-tat reactionary conflict. If we were to carry on with reactionary conflict, we'd end up with world wars and millions of people dying, and we just don't want that. We want peace and maturity moving forward. So, we're not going to go and tear down every mosque or temple. Anyway. But when we're tracking the history of a conflict and, picking a starting point, you kind of need to start with, at least with the Mughal invasion of India. But the Indians were living pretty peacefully. Hinduism is not at least not until it started having conflict with Muslims, and the British inflamed that conflict when they left. Prior to that, and if you actually study Hinduism, you'll find it's a peaceful, accepting religion that isn't really bothered by other religions. And in the history of India, prior to the Muslim invasion, there was not a single religious war. They had political wars. This is different. The Muslim wars largely seemed to be, well, obviously there were political wars. They were expanding their empire, but there was a huge religious component to it. They were spreading Islam with the world. They were doing the good work of subjugating the non-believers and bringing them into the fold of Islam in order to save people through Islam or something like that. Whereas Hinduism, there's much more of a focus of education. People are on their own path. If they don't make it in this life, they've got a future life, and we can make the knowledge available to them. They can take advantage of if they like, and if they don't like, then it will just take them longer. And this sort of attitude does not lead to religious conflicts. So that actually started with the Muslims. And then I do think that there is sections of Hindus in India which are, in terms of their religious conflict, perhaps indistinguishable from Muslims who support this kind of conflict. I think when you go engage in opposition with a group or person, you kind of become what you hate. And this is what has happened to some Hindus in India. So that said, I think the decision by CNN and other news outlets to start their history of this conflict with the construction of the mosque and not with the destruction of a temple or anything about the Mughal invasion, is a propaganda technique in order to make it sound like the Muslims are the victims here. That 500-year-old mosque was destroyed by these, horrible Hindus that went around rampaging. Another fact that these left-wing media outlets choose to leave out of the reporting is that following the destruction of this mosque, many temples were actually destroyed by rioting Muslims. I guess a lot of what I'm going to be doing in this video is pointing out some inconsistencies in the media reporting on this issue, and then a little bit of commenting on my thoughts on the actual issue. I'm not sure which bit I should do first. How about we talk about the actual case a little bit more? So the court ruling in the Supreme Court in India on the matter that permitted the construction of the temple, it happened some 30 years after the destruction of the mosque. Now, it did happen by the BJP, an Indian political party, which is currently in power, and they were also the political party that is part of organizing the riots that led to the destruction of the temple. So you could say the current Indian political party organized the destruction of the temple and also, organized the destruction of the mosque, and also was in power when the Supreme Court ruled in their favor in order for this to be destroyed. Maybe they were just waiting enough decades till they could kind of say like, oh yeah, that was just a big riot, a few way back in history, but now we've waited for Supreme Court permission to build something. But anyway, I totally just do not support the rioting destruction of a mosque, even if it was on a land considered to be holy by Hindus. However, once it's been destroyed, the equation's a little bit different. Then it's like, wow, we have a bit of land with a destroyed mosque. It's also the site of a destroyed temple. For those who contest the idea that there was a temple destroyed and a mosque erected in its place at this site, here's a clip which goes over some of the evidence for this idea.
Book Baburnama Artusaki Babri, Babur was approached by two fakirs to build a mosque over the temple ruins. Then in the place of that mandir, Mir Baki, the commander of Babur, constructed the Babri Masjid. This is what Baburnama says. Even if we choose to overlook Babur's own autobiography, the writings of foreign authors confirms the same, and these writings played a significant role in the case of Ram Mandir. In 18th century, the Jesuit missionary Joseph T. Fontale visited Ayodhya and wrote a book about it. In that book, he clearly mentioned that a fort associated with Lord Rama was demolished and a mosque was constructed in its place. Governor General Lord Wellesley had a surgeon named Francis Buchanan. In 1810, he made a note about the existence of a temple dedicated to Ram and how it was replaced by a masjid. An Anglo-Irish author, Robert Montgomery, who travelled to India in the early 17th century, mentioned in his book about the destruction of a temple and the construction of a mosque over it.
On top of that, the Supreme Court in India did have some archaeological digging done at the site to investigate whether any evidence of the ruins of a temple could be found there. And the Supreme Court, at least, was satisfied with the findings that they demonstrated that there were, in fact, ruins of a temple at the site. And I believe there were some encryptions inside the mosque that referenced the destroyed temple also. But let's suppose that doesn't convince you, or you have debunkings for this idea that a temple was destroyed here on the site where the mosque was erected. Here's some other reasons why I think it does make sense to have the temple built here. So I guess I've got 3 or 4 reasons. One reason is tourism. It looks like there's going to be a lot of tourism coming to this town because of this temple. Hinduism is very popular in India. Surprise, surprise. And especially in Ayodhya, which is considered to be the place of Lord Ramachandra's pastime, and this particular site of temple is particularly special for Hindus. So tourism. So if all these Muslims who are complaining about the construction of the temple, I don't think their wallets are going to be complaining. Second reason, that this location is believed to be special by Hindus. It's not believed to be special by Muslims. So why not give it to them? Third reason, and the Muslims are given in this court ruling another piece of land where they can build a mosque. Now, they're not happy with it. Maybe it's not such a great piece of land. Maybe it's on the outskirts of town. Maybe it's not as big. I'm not sure. But the point is they are being accommodated. Third reason, even if this particular site wasn't the ruins of a temple, all over India, thousands and thousands of temples have been destroyed by Muslims. building at least one temple on the ruins of a mosque is not that big of a deal given the scale of destruction and devastation and insult that has been historically inflicted by Muslims on Hindus within India. And the fourth reason, I'm a little iffy on this reason because I'm not so much into Hindu nationalism. I think that religion doesn't have borders, and just like good science, good theology belongs to the whole world. It might have an origin in India, just like the sun rises in the east. It doesn't mean the sun belongs to the east. This Vedic knowledge, this Chaitanya Vaishnava knowledge, which I personally follow, just because it comes from India doesn't make it Indian. However, I do think that there is something to be said about Hinduism having a home, and if there any place in the world is its home, it's India. So giving a special priority to Hinduism within India, not in a discriminatory way. I'm not into discriminating against other religions, but having some prominence to Hinduism in India, I think makes a little sense. There's plenty of Muslim countries. Strangely, a lot of these Muslim countries aren't the nicest places to live, but there's plenty of Islamic countries. There's only one Hindu country. Now, of course, India is historically a multicultural place. That even within Hinduism, you get a huge amount of diversity. This is why I don't like the word Hindu. And the Muslims are in India now, and they should be welcomed and peacefully coexisted with. I'm all for respectful coexistence with people of other religions and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, but I think there's something to be said about giving a special prominence to Hinduism in its native country. So now I think we've discussed plenty of details of the case, and I've given some thoughts on that. Now I want to talk about various inconsistencies of how the media, particularly left-wing media, comments on this. One thing I want to talk about is land acknowledgements. A land acknowledgements is a thing that's been done in the West in recent years, where when you're at, like a university will do it and say, this land that we're on, before you do any kind of meeting or whatever, you just say something nice about the history of the land, where it's like, yeah, this land used to belong to the Lautoka Native Indians. And I guess the idea with it is that you're peacefully coexisting with, you're acknowledging the existence of these native people and what was done to them. And it's a way of building relations and respect and honoring those peoples and the history. When they just, do nothing but criticize the Hindus for building this temple on the site where a mosque was there, on the ruins of a temple, and the Mughals went around destroying so many temples, it just seems inconsistent, because I think part of a land acknowledgement would be, well, if the people who this land was stolen from could have it given back to them, that would probably be right and just. I mean, at least that would make sense to me. So this is one case where land was taken through war, through conquest, basically stolen, and destruction, pillaging from the invading Muslims. And now the Hindus have one of these pieces of land back, which is considered to be holy by them. Would this not be something to celebrate if you were a believer in the whole philosophy that undergirds the land acknowledgement practice? Now I'm going to play a bunch of clips from David Wood and Apostate Prophet, where they point out various inconsistencies and how Muslims are reacting to this and how the media is commenting on it. And I guess at the end, the last point I'll make is commenting on what I think about this as a political mover by Narendra Modi in order to win an upcoming election.
And banning the slaughter and transport of cows, an animal considered sacred to Hindus. Notice now they're condemning them for making laws about doing something that is extremely offensive to their religion. How is this standard not applied in Muslim countries? Notice, so if these guys were to be consistent, if the author of this article were to be consistent, in Muslim countries, if they say you can't eat pigs because that's offensive to us, the response should be, oh, shameful that Muslims are enforcing laws about what's offensive to them.
I think his point there is pretty unassailable. We don't see these same media outlets, these same authors criticizing Islamic governments for enforcing their Islamic values in their country.
I think you can see why so many Hindus side with Israel in the dispute, because it's a very parallel situation. It's, we're going to conquer the world. We're going to conquer the world. We're going to conquer the world. Oh, we're actually losing this one, and we're not powerful enough to do this thing that we want to do. Oh, we're victims. Poor us. Can college students protest for us? Can anyone help us? Can communists help us? Can someone help us here? And I don't know. It's just kind of pathetic. It's kind of pathetic. So, in other words, if Muslims were really, really nice and consistent and not hypocrites at all, and some Hindus came along and said, we're gonna break up your building and destroy it and build our stuff, ha 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 ha, and I'd be like, hey, it's kind of messed up there. But that's just not what's going on here.
What he's getting at there is actually a strange phenomenon that I became aware of when I was studying the Israel-Hamas crisis and conflict, because it shocked me, the support in the West for Hamas, a actual terrorist organization. Like, it's one thing if you want to stand up for the innocent women and children and so on, who happen to be Muslims involved in this conflict. It's another thing if you want to defend the actual terrorist organizations who have been organizing these attacks on Israel. There's two completely different things. The terrorist organization doing the attacks and the innocent people who are just caught up in this conflict. Completely different things. So we can support the victims of this conflict without supporting the terrorists. But what I found out, the same point David Wood was going on, is this left-wing idea isn't about an absolute moral standard and defending whoever is being wronged based on an absolute moral standard. No, it's about who's the underdog, and whoever's the underdog is just automatically right because they're the underdog. There's serious problems with that idea. Like, someone can be the underdog and be in the wrong. So, with the Israel-Hamas conflict, the question to ask is, if the tables were flipped, or in India, if the tables were flipped, if it was an Islamic government in India, what would they be doing to the Hindu temples? Now, I'm not going to comment on that, but that's a question to ask. We can see what they've done historically in India with Hindu temples. We can see what in other countries is done. It's just, I've looked up, you can find in recent years, like in Bangladesh not long ago, attacks on Hindu temples by Muslims. I think there was one in, let me check. Yeah, Pakistan arrests 129 Muslims after mob attacks on churches and homes of minority Christians. Police arrested 129 Muslims after mob angered by an alleged Quran desecration attacked a dozen churches and nearly 24 homes of minority Christians, officials said. Police also arrested 2 Christian men accused of defacing Islam's holy book. And this article was written August 18th, 2023. So a little over a year ago, not quite a year and a half ago. This stuff is still going on. Some of these Islamic countries are still living in the Middle Ages.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So just to recap, ladies and gentlemen, this is Hagia Sophia, was once the biggest church in the world. Jihadi said, we have to have that. They had it for a while, had it as a mosque. Then Turkey became a bit more secular, wanted to get along and said, hey, how about we turn this in, since there's a dispute over this, why don't we turn this into a museum? That way everyone's feelings are protected. And then just a few years ago, you know what, screw all that. Let's just make it a mosque, and anyone who doesn't want it, a mosque, can cry us a river. Ha ha! And then, of course, what did all the guys say all over Twitter? Ha ha! Cry, die in your rage over this. And now they want us to be sympathetic, so very, very sympathetic over the Babri Mosque.
So what David Wood is referring to here is Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, Turkey. It's a very ancient Christian church. It was for a long time the largest Christian church, so it's quite special to Christians in that regard. In 1435, it was converted to a mosque. And then in 1934, the Turkish government decided to be secular and neutral and converted it to a museum. Now, in July 2020, they reversed this and made it into a mosque. David was talking about is the reaction he saw from the Muslim community on the internet about this happening, which, as he's describing it, was, cry us a river, it's ours, we're having our mosque. Now, you could perhaps compare this to the construction of a temple at the site of the Babri Mosque. And the reaction of the Muslim community is to complain. Now, if they were consistent, they would say, oh, yeah, well, you guys won this time. We got our Hagia Sophia. You guys got your Ram Mandir. All's fair in love and war, or something like that would be a consistent move. But here they're complaining, oh, look what they're doing to us. And then when they're doing it to someone else, they're like, yeah, cry us a river. Now, I haven't actually studied the actual situation of what the reaction from the Muslim community has been around Hagia Sophia. I have studied it a little bit around the Ram Mandir. And there's definitely some inconsistencies. Perhaps we want to qualify it and say it's different people who are complaining about one thing and different people who are celebrating. So maybe the inconsistency is not among the same people, so it could be a moot point, but I still think it's worth talking about.
Yeah, we're not fans of violence. And guess what? I'm not a fan of taking a big mosque and destroying the mosque. Not a fan of that either. I just don't care much when it's one group that is whining and crying, and it's the biggest bunch of hypocrites the world has ever seen. The group that is obsessed with. Matter of fact, there's a section on this in Robert Spencer's book History of Jihad, and he talks about Islam as it moved into India. What the Muslim conquerors would do when they conquered an area, they would go to the Hindu temple. They would convert it into a mosque. They would take the Hindu idols out of the temple, smash them to pieces, and sprinkle them on the path to walk into what is now a mosque, so that they could constantly, every time they walk into the mosque, trample on the idols of the Hindus in order to show their contempt for them.
That sounds fun.
And where do they get this idea? Muhammad was doing the same thing. When Muhammad conquered Mecca, what did he do? Did he respect the beliefs of the people there? No, he took over the Kaaba and he went around. There were 360 idols around the Kaaba. Muhammad walked around with a stick, smashing them and poking their eyes out in order to desecrate them and show his contempt for them. And so that trend continued. That trend continued wherever Islam spread for 14 centuries. Suddenly, when Muslims aren't strong enough or powerful enough to do something, as what's everyone doing against our sacred symbols? Everyone must respect our stuff and our religion and our site and our mosques. And maybe if you had behaved very, very differently for the past 14 centuries, we could take that seriously.
So in their live stream, I'm just chopping up a few clips, but they've been reading from a few different CNN articles where there's a lot of quotes from interviews with Muslims complaining about the Ram Mandir construction, complaining about what the Indian government is doing and so on. And what he's doing is riffing on how the very thing these Muslims are complaining about is the same thing that Muslims celebrate when it is done by Muslims to other religions. And historically, the Islamic religions, the Islamic conquerors have done massive amounts of these sorts of things on a very egregious level. Now, I've explained at this particular case of the Ram Mandir, it's not actually that egregious of a thing. 150,000 rioting Hindus tearing down a mosque, that's not cool. But the Indian government just saying, oh, well, there's the ruins of a mosque here, let's build a temple. And we went over those reasons. So I do think they're very different things. But the point is that there's a hypocrisy going on.
Muslims turned Hagia Sophia and St. John Cathedral into mosques. It's okay. Accusing Christians turning mosques of Cordoba into church, which was a church. Yeah. Oh, and so, notice, so you got the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. No, that's for Islam. There has to be a mosque there. You've got the Kaaba. That was a pagan religious site. Taken over, becomes the most important site in Islam. Hagia Sophia, other churches. Yeah, there's zero concept. If we heard tomorrow that in some Muslim country they just said, hey, we don't like this church being here anymore. It's pagan Christianity, and destroyed it and built a mosque, you'd hear cheers from the Muslim from the Ummah around the world. Isn't it weird? It's weird stuff. Guys, learn the concept of consistency. It's it's not hard to grasp.
I pointed out earlier how I think you can become the thing you hate when you're reacting to something too strongly. Like, I don't think we should be doing any tit for tat, like just because the Muslims are going around converting holy places of other religions into mosques, that it's all right for us to do it. But if they are going to do that, they don't really have a right to complain when someone does it to them. That's the point here.
Fear and anxiety. Yeah, imagine how people feel when Islam conquers them. Probably lots of fear and anxiety, but we're not supposed to care about that. In fact, it's just the opposite. Only a racist and a bigot would care even slightly about the feelings of people who are conquered in the name of Allah. There is apprehension among Ayodhya's Muslims. Every story has to revolve around the feelings of Muslims. Just keep that in mind. Azam Qadri, the 39-year-old head of a local religious body, said that those who lived through the 1992 violence fear the arrival of outsiders. They think these 7,000 people who are invited are coming there to slaughter them. Every time people come from outside, there is trouble. Wait. This guy is in India saying anytime people come from outside India, there's trouble. You mean like invading Muslim armies, bud? Every time people come from outside, there is trouble. One cannot afford to lose their precious belongings, savings, or identity papers anymore. It is not easy to restart your life again. Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing Muslims never did that to Hindus at all. It's never happened.
They would never do that.
No, they wouldn't. Said local Muslims are worried the emboldened crowds will chant provocative slogans against. What are they worried about? Slogans.
Oh,
Provocative slogans. Oh, things like La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. When we're told that only a racist would be at all concerned. Even if a guy's like comes up with a suicide vest and starts screaming Allahu Akbar, you're a racist if you are at all concerned. This reminds me. You familiar with Aziz Ansari?
Oh yeah, I am.
Yeah, so he's a comedian. Not really familiar.
I call him. Oh geez, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's so Aziz Ansari. So I mean, I like the guy. He's funny. I saw him on that show with Ron Swanson. He's on that show with Ron Swanson, Parks and Recreation. So I saw him in there. He's a funny guy. He's a funny guy. I have nothing against him. But there was this article by him in the New York Times that would actually be worth revisiting. But it was about how racist people are in being suspicious of Muslims after so many terrorist attacks. And then he goes into this article about after 9/11, because his mother heard about someone who was, saying something bad about Muslims, she was terrified to go out of the house, and she's super, super worried about all these people. And it's like, wait, how do you not actually get this? If you got guys flying planes into buildings and someone says, hey, I'm a little concerned here, you say, racist. But your mom can hear about someone who did something else, and then she can be suspicious of all non-Muslims.
That's cool.
And be worried about walking outside because of all the non-Muslims out there. How does that make sense? How do you not see that, right? Aziz, you're funny. How do you not see, like in other words, if you wanted to say, hey, if certain people or a group of people attack, do not be remotely suspicious of anyone else in that same group ever. If you actually wanted to take that seriously, you should be blasting your mom there and saying, Mom, why would you think just because of what some person did in some supermarket on the other side of the country that you need to be suspicious of walking outside because there are non-Muslims there? There's just no concept of anything remotely resembling consistency. And you see the exact same thing here. Oh, some Hindus are coming to town. We're worried they're going to be shouting things. Oh my goodness, we're so terrified of that. If it were a bunch of Muslims coming to town who are going to be shouting Allahu Akbar and down with Hindus and death to America and all this other stuff, only a racist and a bigot would be at all slightly concerned about that.
The funny thing here is if you ask the Hindus what is it they plan to do when they go to Ayodhya, they say they want to celebrate, they want to pray, they want to distribute food. That's like a welcoming, festive mood. There's a celebration. No hatred, no down with other religions, just, Lord Ramachandra is back in Ayodhya. Let's all celebrate. Let's share the good news. Let's give out sanctified food.
Okay. Hindus believe that their site. What do you want to do about it? Hindus believe that's their site. Notice, and keep in mind, if Hindus believe that that is a very important site, is that a very important site to Islam? That's not. Keep in mind, we're not talking about the Kaaba. We're not talking about the mosque in Medina. We're not even talking about the Temple Mount. We're talking about some place way on a different part of the world, in a place where you've got tons of mosques, and they're even giving you a new location for a mosque. Why are you glued? Why are Muslims absolutely obsessed with that particular location? There's nothing about that location that is significant to Islam. There's a reason that location is significant to Hindus. Why are you upset? If Hindus say, hey, that site is very, very important to us, can you have your mosque over here? You say, no, we have to have that site. Why is that site important to Muslims? And the answer is, it's important to Muslims because it's important to Hindus. That's why. We want to dominate your site that is important to you, just as we dominate the site that's important to Christians, just as we dominated the Kaaba, which is important to pagans, just as we dominated the site, the holiest site to Jews. We are obsessed with controlling the sites that are important to other people. It makes us feel really important and big, and it makes us feel like our God is giving us victory over you. That's why we have to have that.
Definitely, if you look at the way Muslims have acted historically with their conquest, that does seem accurate. So whose fault is all of this conflict in the first place? Well, apostate prophet has an answer.
Well, there is a thing that is, I have to say, it is actually the fault of Hindu nationalists. Most of what is happening here, considering that, the Hindus back in the day before Islam existed, built their holy sites and everything where Muslims would later come and conquer. So they should have never done that.
Yeah, there you have it. The original Ram Mandir was just built in the wrong location. They shouldn't have built it in the spot where Babur was later going to come, destroy it, and build a mosque. If they'd just built it somewhere else, all of this conflict never would have happened. And now we come to the final topic I wanted to cover, which is people complaining that Narendra Modi is simply doing this as a political tactic in order to win an election. Now, we all have to remember he is a politician, and politicians have to do things in order to get elected. Otherwise, they wouldn't be politicians. So the fact that a politician might be doing things in order to get elected is not a criticism. But we should be clear on that, right? Now, some things might be criticisms if it's something that you just shouldn't do. Like, yeah, he's like spending all this money in a wasteful way in order to just win an election, or telling lies, which he doesn't plan to follow through on in order to win an election. What he's doing is building a temple in a location. He got permission from the Supreme Court. It's done in a way which is going to increase tourism in the area, and all the other reasons we discussed. The only thing I think you could fault him for is he brought the inauguration of the temple forward. Some Hindu pundits are saying, it's not right to open a temple before the construction is finished. The temple's still under construction, but they've inaugurated the temple anyway. He's timed it with an upcoming election. Whatever, he's trying to win an election, big deal. I think he seems to be doing a good job of running the country. The Indian economy is growing. I mean, India is mayhem, so many people, so much corruption and whatnot, but it seems to be going in the right direction at least. So that's all from me on this subject. I'm wearing my Rajasthan t-shirt. We just recently went on a trip to India and got back a couple of weeks ago. That's why I haven't had many videos up for a while. The history of Rajasthan was cool. The kings of Rajasthan were actually really powerful. They were a vassal state under Muslim rule. They fought some armies on behalf of Akbar, who was part of the Mughal Empire. So there's a lot of interesting history there. Maybe I'll do some content on that at some stage. So if you like this sort of stuff, be sure to subscribe. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'll catch you on the next one. Hare Krishna.